Welcome to the last ever episode of Dining with Death. I have all kinds of emotions about this. It's a lot. Before we get started, please hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon. We have a big goal there and I will talk about that at the end of the video. This is one of the strangest murderers I've ever covered. The killings themselves are horrible and tragic, very tragic. And even the lone survivor has been irreparably harmed, with her life changed forever. But as terrible as the killings are, and as strange as the circumstances around those killings are, the killer himself is even stranger. You guys know I am fascinated with the psychology of why killers do what they do, and I know many of you are as well. So when we come across a guy like the one we're talking about today, I don't know, it kind of frustrates me because I feel like everything I've learned and everything I think I know about killers, guys like this one send me back to square one and remind me I don't know anything at all. Today we are talking about the murders of 3 people and the incredible story of one survivor. We are talking about Matthew Hoffman, known as the Leaf Killer. I'm Stacy Lee, your host. Let's get into it.
We'll give you a minute, man, if you need to think a little bit. You know, other people, there's family members out there of other people, and all they want is closure. That's all they want. They've been up for days like you and I have, you know. Heart hurts. I don't understand sign language, man. Is that your heart? You're saying heart? Broken. Your heart's broken? Because of what happened? No? Someone broke your heart? I know you can talk to me, man. What do you want from us? Tell me what you want from us. You gotta talk to me. We talk to a lot of people before we come to see you, so we know you can talk.
What you just saw was Matthew Hoffman in police custody. That was just a little portion of his very strange behavior. Matthew will not speak. He can speak, but he won't. He sits with his head down and doesn't make a sound, and then he gestures that he has a broken heart. It's incredibly odd behavior, but Matthew's behavior in the police interrogation room is just the tip of the iceberg. Matthew Hoffman was born on November 1st, 1980 in Mount Vernon, Ohio. He had an average upbringing as far as we know. He was a quiet guy and always soft-spoken. As an adult, he was the same. The few friends that Matthew did have describe him as intelligent, but without a lick of common sense. He was also very odd. While at the park one day, Matthew, without any prompting, stood up on one of the picnic tables and started turning backflips over and over and over while the other people were sitting there trying to eat. One of his friends remembers going to Matthew's house one day to see that he had strung a tow strap between 2 trees in his backyard and he was walking on it like a tightrope. That was actually a fad when my kids were in high school. It was called slacklining, so maybe that one's not so odd. Once, Matthew was with some people at a parade, and a giant moving truck came down the parade route, and Matthew dashed out into the road and underneath the truck, running from one side of the street to the other, each time passing underneath the undercarriage of this moving truck. People were screaming at him to stop, and that just seemed to egg him on. And then there were the trees. Matthew had a very unusual relationship with trees. We all love trees. For Matthew, it was different. When he was a teenager, he built a huge treehouse in his parents' backyard and spent a lot of time in it, alone. The neighbors that lived next door to Matthew's parents describe him as, quote, a real weirdo. They say they'd look out their window and there would be Matthew's face staring at them through their window after he had climbed a tree to get as close to their window as possible. I guess I'm a Karen because I'm calling the cops. If you're spying on me in my house, I'm weird about my privacy. You're gonna climb a tree and get right up to my window? No. Creepy, weird behavior. Matthew would tie ropes in the larger trees in the area and then round up all the neighborhood kids to swing on them as he watched. He did things like spending hours jumping off the roof of his house and onto a trampoline, like over and over and over for hours, causing all of the neighborhood dogs to bark. In 1997, as a junior in high school, he got into really serious trouble for climbing the high school and running around on the roof of the school. He even refused to get down when the police were called. A lot of those things you can chalk up to just a boy being rambunctious, right? That's what's so difficult, right? Sometimes boys are just being rambunctious. And then sometimes they're psychopaths. When Matthew turned 19, he bought professional tree climbing gear and spent time in Knox County climbing up the tallest trees he could find. He knew the woods in Knox County very well and enjoyed spending a lot of his time in remote spots. In his 20s, Matthew spent time as a nomad, living out of his car and pitching a tent in secluded spots in the trees. He moved to Steamboat Springs, Colorado around 2000 and worked as a plumber. And this is where his behavior turned violent. Matthew began breaking into people's houses and robbing them. In the fall of 2000, he broke into a condominium complex and robbed several of the units. And then, this is so telling, Matthew purchased 10 gallons of gasoline, sprinkled it all throughout the condo complex, and lit it on fire. 16 people went running from their homes, and the fire caused $2 million in damage. Matthew fled back to Knox County, but the police were onto him. Matthew didn't realize that he was already on the police radar. They had him on video doing some really strange things, like stealing the Welcome to Steamboat Springs sign, and he would also steal street signs, especially if they were named after trees. So weird. So the Steamboat Springs police contacted Matthew back in Ohio and gave him the chance to turn himself in, which he did. He went back to Steamboat Springs and he was arrested there for theft and arson. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison and he served 6 of those years. Immediately upon being paroled, he returned to Knox County, Ohio. Matthew's friends tried to reintroduce him to society. They noticed that Matthew had bulked up in prison and he had also spent a lot of time reading. He had to pay back the $2 million of losses for the fire, but he'd only managed to pay back about $5,000 of that. Matthew got very depressed. I can imagine with a $2 million debt hanging over your head that is never going away, that would be really depressing. He struggled to find work. He'd work somewhere for a couple of weeks and then quit, find something else a couple of weeks. But he did end up getting a job driving a truck, and he kept that for a few months. Whenever he was out of work, he would move back in with his mother, Patricia Hedgelin, in Apple Valley. Then Matthew got a job that seemed perfectly suited for him. Doing what else? Working as a tree trimmer. He moved to Columbus, Ohio for the job and worked 40 plus hours a week trimming trees. He was back to doing what he loved, being in the trees. Matthew seemed to do a little bit better at that point. He was known to be very frugal. His friends called him a tightwad. And so it was a big deal for Matthew when, in 2009, he bought a 109-year-old deteriorating house on Columbus Road for $37,500. Wow, that really was 2009, right? You can't buy a shed for that right now, let alone a house. As soon as Matthew bought his house, he tied rope swings to all the trees. Neighbors noticed that there were always kids in his backyard swinging in the trees. Matthew's back door was always open, and there were kids running in and out all the time. A 16-year-old girl later told reporters that she'd spend entire summers climbing the trees with Matthew and the other kids, swinging on the ropes he'd tied to them and having fun. But even then, as a 16-year-old kid, this girl knew that Matthew was strange. She said he was just weird and that she knew he had been to prison, so she thought maybe that was it, that he was having a hard time after getting out of prison. Neighbors said they saw Matthew as someone who lived in his own head. He was friendly but not outgoing, and he just spent so much time in the damn trees. Matthew even had a girlfriend, and just when it looked like things might be going okay for this unusual man, everything fell apart. In the fall of 2010, Matthew and his girlfriend got into a serious fight, and Matthew put his hands around her throat and began to choke her. She was afraid she was going to die. She broke up with him immediately after the fight and stayed completely away from him. Then Matthew's dog ran away, and he was very upset about that. He spent hours and hours looking for this dog. Then finally, he was fired from his tree trimming job at Fast Eddie's. Why? His supervisor was almost afraid of him. This supervisor, a grown man, said he was so creeped out by Matthew and his weird behavior, just his whole strange vibe, that he didn't want to be around him. I mean, that is very telling. There was something really, really wrong with Matthew in this man's eyes, and he wanted nothing to do with him. Oh, there was something wrong, all right. Unfortunately, no one had any idea just how off Matthew Hoffman was. November 10th, 2010. 32-year-old Tina Herman failed to show up for her shift at Dairy Queen, which was completely unheard of. Tina was one of the managers at the restaurant. She was totally reliable and responsible, and she would never miss work without calling in. Valerie Haythorne, Tina's friend and fellow manager at Dairy Queen, became very concerned about Tina. She had been calling and calling, and Tina wasn't picking up the phone. So Valerie left Dairy Queen and drove here to Tina's house. She could see that the lights were on inside, but when she knocked, neither Tina nor either of her kids came to the door. Tina had 2 children, Sarah, who was 13, and Cody, who was 11. Valerie called the police and told them that she was at Tina's house and something was very wrong. Tina's truck was in the driveway, but there was also another car that Valerie didn't recognize. She really thought there was someone in the house, so why weren't they coming to the door? The only thing she could think to do was to call the police.
Hi, my name is Valerie Haythorne, and I work out at Dairy Queen. I'm the general manager out there. One of my employees did not show up for work this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which is totally uncharacteristic of her. She's one of my managers. I drove out by her house and went and knocked on the door, left her a note. She's not answering her phone, which is totally uncharacteristic. She's not answering her texts, and she is not at home, but her truck and her coat are in her house. Her truck's there and her coat is in the house. I'm very concerned about her.
What's her name?
Her name is Tina Herman, Herrmann.
Okay.
I know that she and her boyfriend are splitting up, and he can be a real jerk with her.
Okay. Do you have a phone number for her?
Oh God, I do, but it's in my phone. I'd have to call you back.
Okay, that's fine. What was your name again?
My name is Valerie Haythorne.
Okay. Okay, I will have a deputy swing out there and check on her.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anytime.
The police went to the home and knocked. No answer. There was really nothing they could do, and so they left. The next morning, still concerned, the police called Sarah and Cody's school, and they weren't there. The 2 kids had been there the day before on Wednesday, but on that day, which was a Thursday, they were absent. Now they've got a missing mom and 2 missing kids. Just when police were ready to amp up the search, another call came in from a man named Ron Metcalf. Ron was calling police to report his girlfriend, Stephanie Sprang, missing. She hadn't come home the night before, and that was totally out of character for her. He'd been trying to call her all night and into the morning, and there was no response. The police asked Ron, where was Stephanie when you last saw her? And Ron replied, with her best friend, Tina Herman. That is when the police knew they had a very serious problem on their hands. About this same time, Thursday, around 3 o'clock, Valerie Haythorne, Tina's boss, went back to Tina's house, still concerned. This time she noticed that Tina's truck was gone, out of the driveway, but the unknown car was still there. What Valerie didn't know at the time was that that car belonged to Stephanie Sprang. Valerie was very determined. She became more concerned when she realized that Tina's dog, a min pin named Tanner, wasn't barking. We would call Valerie very vocal and insistent. Remember from the 8 passengers case, the cop wrote in his report that one of the neighbors was very vocal and insistent about wanting something done about the kids that were left home alone? And we love her for that. I seriously will make t-shirts if you guys want them. T-shirts that say very vocal and insistent. Well, good for Valerie. She was very vocal and insistent. And she broke into Tina's house through the back window. Once inside, she saw blood everywhere. It was in the bathroom, it was splattered on the walls, and she was horrified. She ran from the house and she called the police again.
This is Deputy Sylvia. Can I help you?
Yes, this is Valerie Haythorne. I called in last night about Tina Herman being missing. I am out at her house now. I just went in her home because I'm so worried about her. There is blood everywhere.
Okay. Where are you at? I'm sorry. I just got back today, so.
Okay.
So you just need to kind of fill me in a little bit, okay?
Tina Herman works for me. She did not show up for work yesterday, and we have not been able to locate her or her children for it's been 24 hours now. I just spoke with...
No, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Okay.
I just need an address. I just need an address.
481 Kings Beach Drive in Apple Valley.
Okay. Just give us a few minutes, and we'll be en route, okay?
Okay, so...
Don't go back in the house.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in the driveway.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
The police arrived at Tina's house and discovered a house of horrors. Immediately, they thought, because of what Valerie had said on the phone, that Tina's boyfriend, the one she was breaking up with, had done something. Well, this boyfriend went right into the police station and was open and honest, saying he had nothing to do with the missing people. He was visibly shaken and upset and seemed genuinely concerned. Most importantly, the boyfriend was at work an hour and a half away at a Target distribution center the day everyone went missing. He'd even picked up an extra shift and then spent the next day with his friend golfing, still an hour and a half away. So the police are going through Tina's house. They bring in the forensics team and they determine that the crime scene shows serious blunt force trauma and that someone could be dying from blood loss. They cordon off the house, they start going through everything, and then the next day, police found Tina's truck abandoned in the parking lot of the local community college. Luckily, as the police were combing through Tina's house, they found something that broke the case wide open. It was a shopping bag from Walmart with a couple of large tarps and a receipt. Now, tarps are never a good sign when we're talking about missing people, and the police knew that. They went directly to the Walmart store listed on the receipt and asked them to pull the surveillance footage. There, just after midnight on Thursday, they saw a man making the exact purchases on the receipt: some tarps, a t-shirt, and a turkey sandwich. The man left the store and got into a silver Toyota. The police then went to the vehicle database and searched all owners of silver Toyota Yaris. It was a Yaris vehicle. Then, in pulling owners of the records, they were looking for a white man, 25 to 40 years old, with dark hair, a slim build, who wore glasses. There, they zeroed in on Matthew Hoffman, who was unbelievably wearing the same camo shirt in his driver's license photo that they found on file that the man in the Walmart surveillance footage was wearing. They found something else very interesting in Matthew's driving records. He had been pulled over by a cop on the night that Tina, her kids, and Stephanie went missing. Where? Right by Tina's house. In their database, the police then found a domestic violence report made by Matthew's girlfriend about a month earlier. All of this information combined was enough to get a warrant. Just 3 days after the group had disappeared, the police were ready to make an arrest. November 13th, 2010. The police arrive here, warrant in hand, at Matthew Hoffman's house. They did not know if Matthew was armed or if he was dangerous, so they opted for a no-knock warrant. They used a battering ram and broke down the front door, and there they threw in a flash grenade. Matthew was asleep in the front room on the couch. He was stunned and groggy as he got to his feet, but he didn't resist. Oh my gosh. As the police began to look around, you guys, they could not believe what they found. Matthew's entire front room was full of dead tree leaves. As you can see here, he had gathered massive amounts of leaves and thrown them onto the floor of his living room. The police looked at each other like, oh no, like what's under these leaves? That honestly would have been my first thought too. So they carefully waded into the leaves, but did not find any bodies under the pile, just the floor. They continued into the house. It was sparsely furnished and kind of unkept. And then they came to the bathroom. This is just so freaking weird. As you can see here, Matthew had taken bags and stuffed them with leaves before stacking them in columns all around the bathroom. The entire bathroom was covered in bags of leaves. You want to know what I know? Was it like this when he had a girlfriend? Because I have a feeling he must have done this after the breakup. I don't know any woman that would be like, this is normal. This is okay. This is fine. Just such a weird guy. Such a weird guy. Matthew had dead or dying marijuana plants all over the house. He had killed 2 squirrels, and the dead squirrels were inside his freezer waiting to be eaten, sitting next to some popsicles. Look, I know people eat squirrels in some places. It's a little creepier when they turn out to be Matthew Hoffman. There was lots and lots of rope in the house. Remember, he liked to make tree swings. And then it just got worse and worse. There was a locked door that led to the basement. Police broke it down. Matthew had blocked the door, so they moved some items aside and descended the staircase. What they found, in the basement, behind a half-broken cinder block wall, was Sarah Maynard, Tina's daughter. She was tied up by her ankles and her hands were covered in duct tape. She was sitting on a makeshift bed of what else? Leaves, covered with blankets. Matthew had tied a plastic bag around her instead of providing a way for her to use the bathroom. The police could not believe what they were seeing. They told Sarah they were there to help, but they had to take a couple of photos first. After that, they put her in an ambulance. Sarah was disoriented and most likely disassociating. She was saying that she was late for school and she couldn't find her dog. Ugh, that's somebody in shock. That poor girl. As soon as Sarah was safe at the hospital, she told police what she remembered happened. She and her brother Cody came home from school to find Matthew in their house. This would have been on Wednesday afternoon. Matthew immediately attacked Cody and Sarah ran into her room and tried to shut the door, but Matthew grabbed her and threw her down on the kitchen floor. He found some rope that was already in the house and he used it to tie Sarah up. He left her on the kitchen floor for about a half hour, she guessed. Matthew then carried Sarah to Stephanie's car and put her in it. And then he drove her to a ball-field parking lot and left her there, tied up in the car. She didn't know where he went after that. After a while, Matthew came back and put Sarah in another car and then took her to his house where he forced her to put on a pair of work gloves and then he bound her hands up with duct tape over the top of the work gloves. He put her here on this blanket in the bathroom and left again. Over the next 3 days, Matthew would cut Sarah's finger over and over for some reason. She never understood why. And he also sexually assaulted her repeatedly. Matthew would later deny this, but nobody's believing him. There was also evidence. I'll just leave it at that. This guy's a piece of shit. Now, Sarah at this time is unaware what has happened to everybody else. The cops were also unaware what had happened to everyone else. They only had found Sarah. Matthew, now in custody, told police he was going to take himself out, so he was put on side watch. For the next 4 days, he was interviewed over and over, but it is the initial interview that I find the most fascinating.
And I'm really being straight up with you. I don't know what the other guys have done, but I mean, obviously it's their job to come in here and try and, get you to talk and, tell them, what's going on. But the toughest part for me with Sarah this morning was, she keeps asking me about her mom and her brother. I told them that, we're hopeful. She said that when she talked to you about it, you would kind of not, respond, say like, well, don't ask me about that, or don't worry about that, or don't bring that up, or whatever. But I obviously, from this point onward, things are going to be different, okay, for her life and for your life. I mean, I'm not trying to kid you or give you some line of bullshit. I mean, you know that. You're not stupid. I'm trying to figure out is how we can, and I don't really know how easy this would be in terms of her, but how we can try and minimize some of this damage. And I think one of the ways to do that is to just be able to kind of bring this uncertainty in terms of her family to a close as soon as we can.
I can't tell you anything because I don't know.
You don't know?
I knew I must have done something wrong. And I found her in my house. She tied up. And so I took care of her. I don't really know anything else. So I was trying to figure out what had happened.
At what point did you find her tied up in your house? Thursday. Did you ask her? Did you speak with her about, what happened? How did you get here? Anything like that?
She said I'd done it. I figured I had done something I didn't know. I just could try to put pieces together.
Did you recognize her as someone that you had seen before? And, did you realize that this is a person you'd seen before that now was in your house? Or
I don't know
didn't
her.
make that connection? You don't know her? In other words, if it was someone you knew and then, wow, how did you get here in my house? Do you remember her asking you about what happened to her mom and her brother? Because she said that she asked you a couple times. Do you remember that?
I don't want to talk anymore.
On the fourth day, a female investigator is brought in and she seems to start to make some sort of headway with Matthew. When she sees it's going nowhere, she switches and gets quite stern with him and tells him he's wallowing in self-pity and that it's time to man up and tell them where Tina, Stephanie, and little Cody are. Matthew keeps telling the police that he doesn't remember anything. He says he blacked out. He says he knows he's done something bad, but he can't remember. Finally, Matthew starts to talk. He tells the police that the night before the disappearances, this would be Wednesday night, he staked out Tina's house. It was close to his mother's house and it was isolated, and that's why he chose Tina's house as his target. He slept in the woods the night before. Oh my gosh. This is like every person's worst nightmare. You're in your house, you're going about your business, not knowing that there is a literal maniac sleeping in the woods, in the trees across the street from your house that you can't see, watching you. I honestly don't think I can think of anything creepier than that. This is why I have dogs. This is why I have cameras. This is why I have alarms. This is why I have a fence. But mostly the dogs. You cannot get within 100 feet of my house, my dogs tell me. So the next morning, Matthew was across the street watching the house. The kids get up and go to school, and then Tina left the house for a while. Matthew comes across the street. He didn't even have to break in. Tina didn't lock her doors, and he got in the garage. He claims that he was just there to rob the house, and he chose the house because it was so isolated. But while he was in the house, Tina and Stephanie came back together. Matthew said he panicked and attacked them, killing them both. Then he said he wandered around the house in a state of shock for over an hour. He was surprised at what he had done, and he knew it was bad and didn't know what to do next. So what does he do next? He ends up killing the little dog Tanner because it wouldn't stop barking. While he's still in the house, poor Cody and Sarah come home from school, and Matthew attacked them as well. In his statement, Matthew wrote, "I did not enter that house to kill those people. I did not know a single one of them." It is literally a nightmare. And yes, Matthew did kill Cody. With 3 people dead in the house and Sarah tied up for him to assault later on, Matthew got into his car, this car here, and drove to fill up his gas cans. And that is when he gets pulled over by a cop. The cop claims he pulled Matthew over because he got a weird vibe from him when he passed him. He'd never seen him in that area before, and he said he just pulled him over to ask him what he was doing in the area. So people have intuition. You got to follow that intuition. That cop had the intuition. He could only do so much. Matthew got spooked by the fact that he was pulled over, and that changed his mind. He decided not to go to the gas station, fill up the gas cans, and burn Tina's house down. He went back to the house, and that's when he got Sarah and took her to the car. For days, the cops played cat and mouse with Matthew in the interview room, and then he finally agreed to tell them where the bodies were. Oh, this is so disturbing. On November 18th, 2010, Matthew finally spilled it. Matthew drew a little map and gave the cops directions, and they followed his directions, headed out into the Kokosing Lake State Wildlife Area in Knox County. There, they found the large beech tree that Matthew had described to them, and they stood in silence when they realized what they were about to do. Matthew Hoffman, sometime in advance, most likely when he was working for Fast Eddie's tree trimming service, had taken hours and hours of his own time to hollow out this giant beech tree. There was a hole in the top of the tree where 2 branches came together, and that made it attractive to Matthew. I'm also going to tell you that there are theories that Matthew had sexual attraction to trees. I'm not going to go into that today. Inside the hollowed out tree were Tina, Cody, and Stephanie. Matthew Hoffman had dismembered their bodies after murdering them and placed the parts inside trash bags. He had then used a block and tackle to lower the bags down into the hollowed out tree. Investigators then cut this hole about 6 feet up so as not to disturb the bodies at the bottom of the tree. And one by one, they pulled the bags from their hiding place. I've said it 10 times in this episode how strange this guy is, but when you think about this, why on earth would he hollow out this tree if he hadn't planned to do something very nefarious in the future? He might not have planned murdering these exact people, but he knew he was going to need a really good hiding place in the future. And you cannot tell me that he isn't evil and that he wasn't fully aware that he was planning to do something evil. Poor little Tanner's body, the little miniature pincher, was also found inside the tree. Matthew Hoffman pled guilty. There was no trial. The families had agreed to take the death penalty off the table in return for knowing where the bodies were. Matthew got life without the possibility of parole. At his sentencing, family members were allowed to address Matthew. 13-year-old Sarah stood and said, "I think Matthew purposefully was trying to scare me and my family, but I'm not scared of you, Matthew. I'm going to stand up for myself and live my life." Ugh. That's exactly what Sarah has done. She is now in her early 30s and she has children. She uses a different name and she stayed out of the public eye until 2019 when Elizabeth Smart reached out to her. Elizabeth Smart, the kidnapped victim from here in Utah, brought together 6 fellow female survivors of abduction, and Sarah agreed to take part in this program. The other women cried as Sarah told the story of her mother and brother's murder during her abduction, and she and Elizabeth embraced. Sarah is beautiful and doing well, and seeing her in this atmosphere just really put a point on her story for me. Ugh. Sarah belongs to a very secret and a very sacred club. A club very few know what it's like to be a member of, and a club that no one wants to be a member of. Sadly, this club is much larger than any of us realize, and some of its members have been completely forgotten. We talk about these stories so we do not forget the victims of these terrible crimes, and we talk about these stories so we don't forget the people who committed them. Thank you for joining me today on the last ever episode of Dining with Death. I've got a special episode for you on Thursday, and then on January 2nd, you will see the first ever episode of Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. This is really scary for me, you guys. I'm basically either flushing 3.5 years worth of work down the drain or making a good decision and bumping it up to the next level. I hope it's the second. I really do. Please hit the like button if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and you can always join my Patreon. We have a big goal there, and it's this. We would like to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that has never been tested because there's no money to test it. There are thousands of sexual assault kits sitting in refrigeration that have never been tested, and they cost between $500 and $750 each. We would like to raise the money, pick a case, get that kit tested, and get that perpetrator's DNA in the system. If you want to help with that, join my Patreon. If you want to give a couple of bucks a month, that's fine with me. The fundraisers will be special event fundraisers, but joining Patreon makes it so I can continue bringing the videos to you. Happy New Year, my friends. I am so grateful for you. I don't think you understand. I look forward to interacting with you. I look forward to talking with you. And I'm going to start doing some lives in the new year. I'm nervous about it, but everyone keeps telling me they want it, and I'm here to bring you guys what you want. Stay safe, especially over the holiday. Be kind to each other, and I will not see you on the next episode of Dining with Death. I very much hope to see you on the first episode of Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.